from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 17th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came up and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Just recently, Amanda and I met with a financial planner to talk about our savings goals. Financial planning and investing have never held a lot of interest for me. However, I discovered that soon changes when you have a future to plan for. My dad is too nice to say, "I told you so," but he would be right if he did. When my sister and I were growing up, my dad felt that it was important for us to learn about finances. Whenever he met with a financial advisor, he had us sit in on the meeting. At 10 and 12, it didn't take long for our eyes to glaze over and ask, "Are we done yet? Can we go? Do we really need to be here?" I didn't understand why my dad wanted us to be part of those meetings until I sat down with a financial advisor myself for the first time. Suddenly it clicked, and I saw what he was trying to teach me all those years ago. This is called an aha moment. A moment when you say, "Aha," like when a light bulb goes off. It's that moment when the puzzle piece suddenly fits in, completing the rest of the puzzle. A light goes on in the dark. When we have aha moments, we suddenly see something in a new way, or understand something that we didn't understand before. Now, Jesus had this kind of aha moment when he was baptized by John in the 3rd chapter of Matthew. As he came up out of the water, he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove on him. And he heard a voice say, "This is my Son, the Beloved, with whom I am well pleased." In a great moment of clarity, Jesus understood something about himself. He understood something he had never understood quite in that way before. He understood the Father's love for him as he never had. Of course, this insight about Jesus didn't come for his disciples until they went up the mountain with him all the way in chapter 17, where our reading is today. There he is transfigured before them in a bizarre spectacle of light and paranormal activity. Had I been there on the mountain, my heart would have skipped a few beats, and my breath would have caught in my throat as I stifled a yell. The whole radioactive Jesus thing would have been enough to scare the living daylights out of me, I'm sure. Add to that the appearance of Moses, who was dead and buried, and they could go visit his grave in Moab. He had been that way for thousands of years. And Elijah, who was last seen riding to heaven in a chariot of fire drawn by flaming horses. Something just doesn't add up about Peter's response to what he sees. Lord, he says, as if it was any other day, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Now, Peter recognizes that something holy is happening. He offers to build a tent for each of them, much like the tent that was inhabited by God's Spirit when the Israelites wandered the desert for 40 years. Yet I'm not sure that he really understands what he is seeing. Because if he did, he would not be able to move, much less speak. As it is, he doesn't demonstrate any of the fear or wonder or mystery that I think I would feel in his shoes. Now it's easy to look back and to believe that we are somehow different than Peter was. That we understand what Peter missed or see clearly what he could not. It's tempting to believe that the mystery of God can be fully explored in a Sunday school class or adequately taught in a confirmation program. It's tempting to believe that the life of faith is all about having the right opinions, doing the right things, setting the right priorities. It's tempting to believe that we are smarter or wiser or cleverer than the ancient Judeans like Peter and his friends. Yet I'm not sure that I would respond any differently to the spectacle that Peter witnessed if I was there instead of him. I remember the first time that I presided at the Lord's table. It was an exciting moment. For the first time in my life, I would stand up in a church and tell the story of the night in which Jesus was betrayed. I would speak the words that he spoke, and I would distribute the body and the blood of Christ. I was nervous when I got up in front of the assembly. The right words came out of my mouth. The right actions were performed, yet something felt like it was missing. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but somehow the bread and the wine felt unusually ordinary. Now, I had helped my pastors distribute communion many times before when I was an assisting minister. Then it seemed like the entire act of eating and drinking was on fire with God's presence. Yet as I distributed the bread and the wine that first Sunday, everything continued to feel very plain. Like Peter, I saw, but I felt like I could not understand what I was seeing. I witnessed a spectacle that should have filled my heart with fear and wonder. Yet the mystery of communion somehow felt diminished for me. I can't help but wonder if those who find church boring or have become disenchanted with it have experienced the same loss of mystery and wonder. When we gather as a church, God does something extraordinary. Like Moses and Elijah on the mountain, the resurrected Jesus walks among us through his word. His baptism and his meal are ablaze with the Spirit of God. And that same Spirit lives in each and every one of you through faith, making you the dwelling of the living God. These are things that should cause us to fall to the ground in fear and wonder in the terror of God. Yet the full extent of the mystery and wonder of these events is often lost on us, just as it was on Peter and James and John. Aha moments aren't ours for the asking. They catch us off guard, coming to us when we least expect them. Peter is in the middle of speaking when all of a sudden a bright cloud overshadows them, and a voice from the cloud says, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." In that moment, Peter, James, and John all had that aha moment, which drove them to the ground in fear. Suddenly they understood what they were seeing, with Moses and Elijah standing there and Jesus radiating white. In a moment of clarity, they understood what Jesus had already come to know about himself. They understood the Father's love for him in a way that they never had before. And it suddenly clicked for them that their ordinary teacher was ablaze with the presence of God. Now, it takes time and experience in living the mystery of God before we have our first aha moment. Just look at the disciples. They spent every single day with Jesus between chapters 4 and 17, listening to his teaching, watching him heal, and working alongside him. Yet they didn't have their first aha moment until his ministry was over halfway complete. These things take time, as my dad would tell you. After all, it took me over a decade before I could appreciate what a financial advisor had to say. But when that aha moment finally comes, it changes the way that you see the world. Things that seemed flat and lifeless before suddenly take on new meaning. And what was foggy becomes just a little bit clearer. The mystery of our faith finds focus in our Lord Jesus. Whatever we are to know about God, or whatever we are to learn about God, we learn from Jesus. He is the Father's beloved Son, with whom the Father is well pleased. His words and his actions open our eyes to the Father's will. And through faith, we receive the Father's Spirit. To abide in the mystery of God is to abide in Jesus Christ, to share in his baptism, to learn from his word, to eat at his table, and to share the bread of life. Listen to him and feel your hearts burn within you. For Jesus is ablaze with God's presence. You are in him, and he is in you.